This podcast is made possible by First Call. Let's end the addiction crisis together. The first step to a future free from addiction is to make the first call.
Good morning, this is First Call. How may I help you?
Call 816-361-5900 or go to firstcallkc.org.
Hello, everyone. It's Bill Brandmeier once again, and I'm so excited to be here today. This is our second episode. It's Answering the Call. This is a First Call production. It's co-produced by ShareWaves, which is a nonprofit that's trying to help kids and help kids be better. And this podcast is specifically geared towards allowing you to understand that there's a resource out there in Kansas City that is trying to help you navigate the crazy world that we're raising our kids into and that we all live in. And that's why we're here today. And today's a very special episode as we gear up to get back to school and to push our kids forward into their lives, sometimes letting them go into spaces that might not be so comfortable for us. We need to learn how to talk to our kids. And so today's episode, our second episode of Answering the Call, we're talking to parents and letting them know that there are specific ways that we can help our kids find themselves into situations where they can have the tools to be better people. And I'm so excited today to be joined by one of the city's best experts. That's what I'm saying. This is someone in her life who has dedicated her life to understanding how do we prevent addiction in the lives of our kids and the people that we love. And I have Margaux Mueller here. Margaux, your title is Director of Prevention Services for First Call. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited. And that's a little choppy with my introduction. I hope I got it right. Is there any way that you would have changed what I said as we get started here and kind of introduce who you are and why you feel like you're here?
No, I think you did a great job. I appreciate you calling me the expert of our city.
Yeah, there you go. Well, a lot of times people are afraid to reach out. We talked in our first episode of the stigma that it exists around navigating issues in our lives, and when someone in our life is having problems, you kind of want to close the ranks. You want to kind of stay insulated and not let anybody know that you're suffering. And First Call is all about breaking that stigma, right?
Yes.
Giving people something to turn to that can help them figure out what the best next step is. Talk a little bit about the experience of being with First Call, understanding that you're part of an organization that is dedicated to being there for people, and the struggles that people have with making the call, and how neat it is that you're there to answer it.
Yeah. So I've been working with First Call for almost 10 years in the prevention department. I started off as a community prevention specialist, and we had a team of, I think, 3 when I started.
Okay.
And that was just on prevention. And now the prevention team is, I think, 11 people when we're fully staffed. And over time, I've just learned a lot about the importance of building trust in young people's lives. But when you talk about answering the call and the importance of that, of course, there's a stigma surrounding substance use disorder. But when you talk about kids, I think that stigma is even greater because you're acknowledging maybe that you missed something as a parent, and that's not always the case. It just happens. Kids make mistakes. Kids get involved in risky behavior. Kids do things, and it doesn't necessarily mean that their parents have done something wrong. But for a parent to acknowledge that and make a call about their kid is very difficult because society then looks at them and blames them.
Well, I think that's a really good place to start. And I want everyone to know that we have Emily Haig here, who's the executive director of what I forgot to introduce. And Emily, I'm sorry about that. I'm so glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here too.
But I think it's a really good place to start. Being a parent isn't easy. None of us are got it figured out, right? And it's every day. It's a challenge. I was happy this morning at 7:30 when I heard my son upstairs who got himself out of bed. He's 15 years old, and he's getting himself ready to drive himself to school for the first time this year. And last week was kind of first week, but today's the first day of real school, and he's up and at him and headed out the door, and that makes me feel good. There are going to be other days where I get up at 8:30 and he's still in bed, and what are you doing? I expect you to do. So I think that acknowledging kind of first off that being a parent's hard, right?
Yes, being a parent is very hard. Yes, I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, and you get to work with parents all the time who kind of come in at a crisis point, but we all are trying to figure out what the best way is to make the best of our lives and our kids' lives. And, I can remember growing up in my crazy family life, and, it was always, my dad was always like, I want my life to be better than, I want your life to be better than mine was. I want to make sure I'm better than my dad was. And I think I brought that into my life as a parent. And sometimes that's not even enough to be better.
Well, and I feel like Margaux and I have some shared history in terms of our why that I think is so powerful in terms of why we both place such a high value on prevention. Do you want to talk about that a little bit about your family growing up?
I was even going to say that, I'm not a parent right now, but I'm going to be in February. So I'm pregnant right now.
Oh, how exciting.
And as you're talking, I'm like, the worrying starts before the kid is even born. Mm-hmm. And when I've even talked to Emily about some of the concerns I've had, she's like, oh, just get ready. This doesn't stop after pregnancy. Welcome to parenthood.
Hopefully more empathetic than that.
No, definitely more empathetic, but you're not the only one that has said that.
Yeah.
The worrying, is just now beginning. Right. Yeah. And I've told myself before that, I'm going to be the best mom that I can and make it different than it was than my childhood. But at the same time, anything can happen in someone's life. So the reason that I do this is I grew up in a home with substance use disorder, and it was very, very prevalent in my life. It actually is the reason that my parents got divorced. It caused a lot of problems when I was younger. And I think that my biggest why is that I was in and out of therapy all the time, different therapists, and I grew to almost resent therapists because I thought that they were trying to pull us away from my mom, who was the substance user.
Right.
There wasn't really an adult, though, that told me everything was going to be okay. Mm-hmm. Every therapy session was almost to get one of the parents in trouble. And there wasn't any family member or adult that was ever just it's going to be okay, this will pass, or your mom is sick, or your dad isn't leaving your mom because he doesn't like her, or something like that. There's a deeper meaning here, and no one really explained it to me. And it wasn't until after college that I worked at a residential treatment facility that I really understood the impact on my parents, not just the kids, right. And the importance of being there for kids when they're going through something really, really difficult at home.
Yeah. Well, it's obvious to me that you've done some work around this family of origin stuff, and it takes work. Mm-hmm. Similar, I have had to do some work around what my life was like when I was a kid. And I went to therapy as a young kid. My parents struggled with their marriage, and we were a pretty chaotic household, and I've had to go back and work through what the impact was, not only on me as you kind of look inward out, but also what were they going, like you said, what were my parents going through?
I think the other thing that when you're talking this concept of ladder pulling, where I do think generationally, especially as working women or working mothers, the generation that went before us had to work a lot harder to get to where they were as females in the workplace and as working parents. And so sometimes I feel like there's two choices. One, we can turn around, and I think our generation has chosen to turn around and be generous and supportive and just try and help one another. And that part about helping other parents or leaning on people, I think, is part of our DNA as a generation. Whereas maybe it hasn't been so hard for us to get to where we're going, and it does feel like a refreshing change. But I can understand why my parents' generation sometimes just focused on well, that's not how it was, and it was much harder for me, and
right.
And it's it's not the most helpful approach, I don't think, but I understand why it exists. And I think for this conversation, knowing that if this is a question that I as a parent have, that means my friend has probably wondered the same thing, or their friend, and just normalizing it's okay if we don't know and we can figure it all out together. I think that's a strength of our generation.
Well, 100%. And it's kind of the reason why this is such a great, timely discussion. To me, what we've kind of introduced here is, and we're going to go into how do you talk to your kids about drugs and alcohol, which, I want to know that answer. But could you say that it begins with knowing yourself pretty well? You got to do some work. I mean, parents can't just show up and think that they can talk to their kids about drugs and alcohol and not have some sort of knowledge that they had to fight through this same issue when they were young. I mean, I can remember when I was at 15 years old what it was like, and I do that to my son all the time. When I was 15 years old, this is what I felt, and it somehow connects us. So
definitely,
so parents need that.
Having some self-awareness about your own experience. And also your views on drugs and alcohol use and people that use drugs and alcohol and people with substance use disorder. I think all of that is important if you're going to talk to your kids about it.
And obviously answering the first call is not going to start the conversation with a parent saying, have you checked yourself out yet? That's not what you guys do. But I think in this context, in this conversation, I think it's a good point to make that as we head into especially the adolescent years, the complications that our kids face. And I want to talk a little bit about that since you've been doing it for 10 years. There's been kind of a shift in what kids are facing with cell phones and the prevalence of screens and social media and the access to and the overuse of Snapchat and some other things. I do want to touch on that in this show because I think it's one of those things that as parents we can all be like, I have no idea how Snapchat works, but our kids are on it all the time. And,
right.
As we start talking to parents specifically about what it takes to have these conversations with your kids, we've kind of named two things. You need to know yourself, and you need to come with no pre-existing thoughts and ideas of how this conversation is going to go. Right? You need to be really open and honest and clear. And I downloaded a bunch of little steps about what to, how to guide this conversation today. But I really want you to share from your experience, what are the things that parents need to know? And we can take it at different levels because the conversations can start early, right? We can have
the
these
earlier the better.
Yeah, say that again. That's important.
The earlier you start these conversations, the better.
Yeah.
And they don't have to be intense, like at an early age or really ever. Like it can be basic education of just like, you see mom or dad taking Tylenol and they explain like something about, this Tylenol you can get at the store, but it says take 2 every 8 to 12 hours if I'm in pain, things like that. But we keep it up here because if you take too much, you could get sick. And then as soon as a prescription comes around, like the difference in the bottles and things like that, like it can start early as just like explaining medicine.
Right.
Yes.
We had that conversation. If you guys are listening and you want to know more about First Call, Emily and I had our first episode where we talked about her experience with First Call, what First Call is, what it's all about. But in that, you shared about your daughter one daughter saying to the other daughter, "Is there poison in every?
Is there poison in all medicine?"
Yeah.
And Violet saying, "That's mom's whole job, Ellen."
Yeah.
I don't think I knew this story.
Come on,
great.
that's funny. So anyway, you can listen to that. That'll be our first podcast. But okay, so how early is too early? You're saying not,
I don't think there is a too early. I mean, of course, like I wouldn't be. Again, I'm not a parent yet, so this could all
You're
change.
Fine.
No,
you're an expert.
I don't think I would be starting the conversation at like 3 years old. However, I'd be prepared to answer questions.
Right.
Because kids are curious, kids are smart, they're watching, they're paying attention.
Right.
So always be prepared to answer questions truthfully and honestly. And you can always give a little bit of information and then say, we can talk about this more when you're a little older, but never leave them with just that. Give them some piece of information and then say, let's continue this conversation as you get older. Now, with that in mind, when you can start the conversation, I think as early as kindergarten, because we have programming that starts as early as kindergarten. And it's not necessarily like marijuana facts or like what you need to know about alcohol, but it's just like effective communication and how to let your parent know if something doesn't feel right or you're worried about your friend, because kids start worrying at an early age. Just simple things like that, like safety conversations.
Well, and it's kind of incorporated into some of the safety conversations kids need to have about sexual abuse and
Exactly.
It
Yes.
can kind of be the same. If you're parenting out there, you're worried about all of these things.
Yes, exactly.
I think, and the hard thing to the point is, I mean, the end goal is you want to create a space where your kid knows that they can ask you the questions and that they can trust you to respond with facts and information and being truthful. And I think that can be a hard part for parents, because my 10-year-old, or, like one of the first questions once they kind of know what's what with drugs and alcohol, they're going to say, well, did you ever smoke cigarettes? Have you ever used drugs?
The point. There's a lot of parental bypass things that we say, like, do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
I'm the boss up, like there's things that we say to our kids where we're like, don't judge me. I'm your, whatever. And
Yes.
I think we have to be careful of that.
Right. Because, like, as we get into the teenage years, and let's say you have a child that you're concerned about their substance use, and they are 14, 15, 16, and you've caught them drinking alcohol, like, one of the things I would also say is if you're going to approach your child about this, like, be prepared to have it thrown right back in your face.
Right.
Like, be prepared to be called a hypocrite.
And I don't want to get too personal with you, but when you were navigating the situations in your early childhood, did you know your mom was hurting? Did you know she was sick? Did she have any conversations with you about her addiction at all?
That's a really good question. I don't think I knew why she was drinking. I don't think I knew that she was sick. I don't think I knew that she was hurting. I thought that it was a choice.
Most kids do.
Yes. And there were a few times where she relapsed. Like, I remember the first time that she went to treatment. I was really young. But then I remember in later years, like, finding wine bottles and things like that, and, like, being so upset with her. Like, how could you do this? Why would you do this? Like, thinking, like, you could lose us again. Like, you could lose custody of us again. All these things. Like, you're mean to us when you drink. Like, not understanding that, like, if she was drinking again, something else was going on underneath. I had no idea. I don't even this is the first time I've even thought about that. You asking me that.
Right.
Yeah, I don't. And I had never.
Well,
thought
I think
of
it
her
leads
being
me
hurt.
to say that we kind of have to separate things out here. If you are suffering from some sort of addiction problem or your own issues, you have to get those addressed first. Make the first call. Call first call and get help for yourself before you're trying to have this conversation with kids. Now, we're our audience now is we're talking to parents who are at a place in their lives where they have at least some sense of they're not wrapped up in their own addiction, right?
Right.
So that's so let's go ahead and head down that road then. So a parent has a teenager. They've had some conversations when they were younger about safety and stuff, and they find out that their kid is being exposed to marijuana or alcohol. There's alcohol at a party, or the what you hear is like, oh, the police came to our party and 3 people got arrested, and oh, were you drinking? No, of course not. Or whatever. How do you start to talk to your kids about what they're going to face? Is it 12, 13 years old? They're going into high school. They're middle schoolers. Yeah. They're talking about it at school, right? The first call's in some schools, right?
Yeah, we're in tons of schools throughout the metro area. Right. So they're starting to hear about it, absolutely. But even when we go into the schools, like, I think that kids are still thinking, like, that won't happen to me. Like, I remember thinking that when I was in middle school, high school. Like, oh, yeah, that's great. I think that the education has totally changed. Like, I'm not showing pictures of, like, someone, like, deep in their addiction and, like, teeth are missing. Like, and I remember being shown that picture as a child. Like,
this is a frying pan with an egg.
Yeah, like, that's not what we're doing. But I remember seeing those when I was younger and being like, that'll never be me. Like, of course I think that. But I do think that the kids that we are talking to, Well, yes, absolutely. Most of them have experimented with alcohol or marijuana once we get to like 7th, 8th, ninth grade and beyond. They're still thinking that their use is not problematic until you start asking the questions of why are you using? Okay, can you give me your vape for the weekend and be fine? Well, no, I couldn't do that. I need to hit it right after school. And then I say, okay, well, that is a developing dependency.
Right.
Let's think about what's going through your brain right before you hit that vape. Can you write down over the weekend what feeling you have right before? And this is, again, way before, like, I'm talking to parents, but it's kind of putting them in a position to recognize their own behavior around it. And that can kind of be a wake-up call, too.
Yeah, this is emotional maturity, right? This is...
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm just having a funny remembering we found a vape in my 13-year-old daughter's, bedroom hidden in a, stash place. And we took it out and we left her a message. We just wrote her, we didn't take it. We just wrote her a letter and put it back in the stash place. And it said, we know that you're vaping and we want you to, do a research project on what it does to your life,
Yeah.
And so she had to turn in a paper.
Yeah, it's kind of like, of course, and then that's just like step one. And of course there's a conversation about it. Like that's not acceptable in our home or whatever your own like expectations are, because each parent's expectations are different. But like you want to put them in a position to do their own research on it. Mm-hmm. And you need to do your own research on it too, because you don't want to be caught in a position where they're telling you things and you're like, whoa, I didn't know that. Is that true? Especially with vapes now and vaping nicotine, and kids think that they can just vape flavor, which is very rare and uncommon, but they'll tell you that. Or with marijuana legalization, things like that. Like you need to be prepared to have your own facts too, so that you can have an informed conversation with them, because their research might not be as good, but they think they know. Like marijuana is medicine. Like you can get prescribed it by a doctor. Like that's what they'll tell you. Like, and
it's all natural.
Right. And it's like, okay, for some people, but like for no one under the age of
25.
Exactly. I was trying to think of the legal age, but yeah, your brain's not fully developed. So it's absolutely not medicine for you. Yes.
Right. I had a thought. I think, allowing your kids to experiment is scary. Mm-hmm. So, but at the same time, you're not going to be able to lock them down.
Right. And I don't think we don't want to encourage experimentation, whatsoever.
No.
Like, hey, go try what you need to and come back when you have questions. But we also can't be shocked when they do experiment, because it's so rare that a young person's not going to experiment. Like I experimented when I was younger. There, even into my 20s, there are still things that I've experimented with. Like it's part of life. It's part of growing up. Like it's also just knowing what the risks are. So informed decision making, informed risk taking.
My wife and I were saying over the weekend, I'm further away from high school than you two are, and you guys are kind of closer to it. You have a little more relevance to what a kid is experiencing now. But even us, we're just so we weren't facing this whole phone, social pressure, connectivity. Everybody knows everybody. In my high school, if you smoked pot, you were a freak. I mean, it was like you were not.
Wow.
You were not part of the cool. It's like. And that's not the case now.
No, that wasn't even the case. I think when I was in high school,
it's crazy.
It was if you smoked pot, of course there were some wallflowers that smoked pot, but there were also a bunch of the popular kids smoked pot, and I remember the football players, a lot of them did pain pills.
Right.
It was just starting to become
the thing.
Yeah, a growing thing. There were some kids that died of overdoses when I was in high school and right after high school. So I think that's when I started really being exposed to it. But it wasn't like you were saying, like it wasn't the weirdos. Like it was
Yeah.
everyone was using, like everyone was drinking on the weekends.
Or did you think everyone was drinking on the weekend?
My friend group.
Yes. Because I feel like,
And
you
I
know,
think I
when you
was
look at the data, it's like, I mean, there's a healthy chunk of 10th, 12th graders that are experimenting or using consistently in the past 30 days, but it's still not the majority.
You're right. Yes.
And I
it's
think
most
that's
people
Yes.
ran in the circle.
And that was
yeah.
that was an experience I had too, except all of us were high school athletes or involved in student council. I was student council president. I took that seriously.
other
I
things.
signed a contract that said you can't use drugs or alcohol. And I did have all this prevention messaging at home where I was like, not worth the risk or, you know, whatever. But it is interesting. Like, we think everybody is, and to parents, like, you might think every kid is smoking weed or drinking alcohol, but that's not what the data tells us.
Yeah,
so
the data
so that
tells
makes
us
the red
otherwise.
flag even more of a, you know, stand higher and be more of a red flag, because
Yes.
if less people are doing it and your kid is, then it's a big
And
Or-
if your kid thinks everyone is doing it, then maybe like, who are their friends?
right.
Or
right.
if just, I mean, you might have concrete evidence to know that your kid is experimenting with drugs, alcohol, but I guess my point is like, don't make the assumption that they are.
Right.
Right?
Yes,
Don't make
absolutely.
the
I would agree
assumption.
with that. Don't assume that they are doing so.
So I want to start with the end here, and kind of work our way back, because most parents in this situation dealing with this problem wait for crisis to do anything.
Absolutely.
And to have the conversations. Everybody waits until they have to, because they just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And that's first call, you know, is probably, you know, you're like at this desperate spot and you call and this nice
For
lady
sure.
answers and you're
Yes.
like, oh my, I'm at my wit's end. I don't know what to do. My son almost died last night, or my daughter, you know, didn't come home, you know, for 3 days and I don't know where she, you know, fear, all of this, and, you know, hard to take the genie out of the bottle at that point. You've kind of passed the point of no return. So I would have to say that, I mean, you can say it for me. What's your advice to parents to we already said start early. We already said create safe environments to have these kind of conversations. But as we are having our kids experiment, what kind of conversation should we be having on weekends and after the fact and the morning after and when we discover?
I would definitely start to normalize the conversation. Ask questions, but not too many. Don't press. And if you're going to ask questions, like about where they're going, what they're doing, be prepared to listen. So I think a big point is like know who your kid is hanging out with, know their friends, know their friends' parents. And I remember like when I was in high school, my dad was so the parent that like if I was going to sleep over at someone's house, even when I was a senior in high school, like he was calling the parents to make sure they were home. And it was so humiliating at the time. But it now totally makes sense. Like know where your kid's going, know their parents,
Right.
know who they're going to be hanging out with. And
Just
if
make
you're,
that the expectation.
yes,
I'm going to
make
know
that
where you are.
Yeah.
expectation. And if your child starts to say, I'm going out tonight, and you ask with who, and they say two names whose names you've never heard of, and they're usually with,
Right.
I don't know, Michael and Tommy, and tonight they're with Peter and Derek. Like, who are Peter and Derek?
Right.
Like, what happened to Michael and Tommy? Why aren't you hanging out with them anymore? You've known them forever and know where they're going.
Right.
Like, it's not just, and we're going to go out. It's, where are you going? Are you going to dinner? What dinner are you going to? Are you going to a friend's house? Because that's okay. What friend's house is it? And then it's up to you. Like, do you care if the parents are home there? Like, at a certain age, like, does it, I mean, we were left home alone as kids.
Right.
Like, does it really matter if the parents are home, or are you more worried about, like, you're trusting your own kid? So ask the questions, be prepared to listen, normalizing the conversation. And I had another thought that's going to come to me.
I mean,
like,
and
in a
Something I
second.
was thinking about is like some just baseline education, and maybe just for you as the parent to know about, like, it does take a teenage brain is hardwired for risk taking. And so making peace with that reality, whatever. It may not be substance use, but it might be like driving super
great.
fast or drinking energy drinks.
Yeah.
Right. Driving without a seatbelt. Like a big thing is having the conversation is at like, you don't get better at taking certain risks. For example, the first time you ever skateboard, that's a risk. Like you're not going to be very good at it the first time you get on a skateboard. But over time, you're going to become better at skateboarding.
Right.
However, you will never be good at skateboarding without a helmet. You will never be good at riding in a car without a seatbelt. That's just risky every single time. You don't become a professional not seatbelt wearer.
Right.
Love that. Each time you drink, kids think that the more they drink, the more that they become good at drinking and they can handle more and more. No, there is a risk every single time. And is it worth the risk to you? So also weighing the consequences. So
I mean, just example, right there, that's money right there. That is so huge.
There's a risk every single time.
Yeah, that's
and
huge.
Are the consequences worth it to you? So like if, I don't know, I'll use the name Tommy again. If Tommy's mom doesn't mind that he smokes weed, but Michael's mom does, Tommy's going to smoke weed at his house because there's not so much of a consequence there. He's not going to get in trouble from his mom. But Michael, if he smokes at his house, his mom's going to get really mad at him and he's going to be grounded.
Right.
So he's not going to smoke at home. But when he goes to Tommy's house, he might because Tommy's mom doesn't care.
Correct.
So are the consequences worth it to you? Is it worth it to you to get in trouble from your mom? Or like, again, it all depends on what expectations are set for each child, but weighing the pros and cons of the risk. Understanding that like, yeah, they're not going to become a better risk taker. They're still going to take the risk, but what are the consequences of that risk?
Well, I have to say that probably one of the most common complaints that parents make is I can't talk to my kid.
Yeah.
I mean, you laugh. It's like
right,
but
because I remember that. Like, you're so annoying. Why do you care?
Right. And we have to find ways to talk to our kids, even if it's, we went on vacation and you're going to play Catan with me, or you're going to play a game with me. We're going to play skip, whatever. We're going to have time together, and it doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be. That's what I love about sports and outside activities is it gives us something to talk about. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed the fact that my son finally liked watching football with me.
Right.
Because it just gave me something to do with him that wasn't, I'm your dad and you're going to do it because I told you to kind of thing. And I don't think parents seek enough about how to connect. And you have to work at it.
Yeah. I remember in the middle of COVID, we did like a project with a local community, and it was called Bringing Families Back to the Dinner Table. Yeah. Because families don't have dinner as a family around the dinner table together anymore. Right. Like it's so uncommon because of sports, other activities, work, things like that. And I understand that it might not be realistic every night. But maybe it's every Wednesday night or every Tuesday night you do Taco Tuesday at home or something like that. Find a night that works for your family and bring your kids and your spouse back to the dinner table and just talk about how your day was. Right. At first, it's going to be annoying to the young people because, like, why do you care? Like, my day was fine. At school was fine. My friends are fine. But over time, you start to build conversation. And there are also tools on like conversation starters about that. Like that sounds very technical, but they're very easy. Like if you, I don't know.
Well, in those conversations, like we always do a high-low at the dinner table. And I feel like it's, as a parent, really important for our kids to see like we have bad days, we have good days. Again, like they need to know that we know how to handle a bad day. Like it's not their job to fix it or be responsible for it. But I think, we have to be willing to be a little vulnerable or less than perfect with our kids to build. And that's just how we build trust with anybody. And the same rules apply with our kids. Like we want them to trust us.
And on that note too, like they'll pick up on like if you're doing the highs and lows every night with your kids and they notice on the nights that you talk about a really low and you have like a cocktail in your hand and you don't have a cocktail in your hand on the other nights, they notice that type of stuff too. That's a great point that
Kids
Emily's
know
making.
this a lot
they
more
need
than
to
we
see
think they do.
you modeling that you can handle a bad day in a healthy way.
Yeah. Hey, that's really good. And I hope that you listening out there have enjoyed hearing from the experts about this as your kids go back to school and create memories that will last for their lifetime. You know, we want those memories to all be good memories, right? Like we want our kids to come away from this time in their lives thinking, my parents had it. My parents helped me. My parents were there for me. That's what I want my kids to say. And you know, they're going to, I know, I already have a 24-year-old that looks back and goes, why'd you do it that way? You know, like, but they're never going to second guess that I love them. They're never going to second guess that I have their back. And they're never going to second guess that I'm always there to talk to them. And those are the things that I think parents need to really use these skill sets that we've talked about today to fortify. Do you want to try to sum it up for me a little bit? Is that something that you have, you know, kind of off, you know, create safe space, or do you want, I don't know. I don't mean to put you on the spot.
No, create safe spaces, talk early. I think one of the main things that I would say is that there are things in our life that increase or decrease the likelihood that we will engage in risky behaviors. And the number one thing that decreases the likelihood of engaging in risky behaviors or developing a mental health challenge is having at least one trusted adult in your life as a child. So one adult that you can go to when things feel overwhelming. And it doesn't have to be your parent. It can be your coach or teacher, the bus driver, a cafeteria staff member. Like, don't underestimate the value of other adults in your child's life. It may not always be you, but try and create that space where you can be a trusted adult either for your child or someone else's child, because it is the number one thing that decreases the likelihood that they will develop challenges later in life. Well
said. Perfect. Well, this was everything I was hoping it was going to be. You did a great job. I really appreciate you joining us today, and I look forward to, I think we're going to be friends. So
yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah. You're listening to Answering the Call. This is a new podcast that's been produced in partnership with First Call and Sharewaves, and we're just really excited that you joined us. Thank you so much. We have other episodes to do, so we hope you keep listening.